You're listening to Therapy for Your Money, a podcast about all things money and finance for therapy practice owners. If you want to feel confident and in control of your financial life, then you've come to the right spot. I'm your host, Julie Harris. I'm an accountant and the owner of Green Oak Accounting. My firm specializes in working with private practices across the US, and my team and I have worked with hundreds of private practice owners. I'm on a mission to share all the best practices I've learned along the way because I want you to have a profitable private practice. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Therapy for Your Money. Today, we are talking about believing in your self-worth with Tiffany McLain. Tiffany, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to both be a guest, and I'm also very excited to hear all your other guests. I know it's going to be phenomenal.
Oh, thank you. So I'd love to hear a little bit about you, your practice, and the consulting work that you do.
Absolutely. I'm Tiffany McLain. I'm the creator, founder, teacher at the Lean In and Make Bank Academy, where we help therapists build wealth, both financial and emotional wealth. But we put an emphasis on the financial wealth because therapists are so good with emotions and they're so scared about money. So we really lean in and help therapists understand what it takes to become a premium fee cash pay therapist in private practice without guilt, without shame, actually understanding how to do it and feel good about doing it.
I love it. And I also love the name of your course, Lean In and Make Bank. So how did you get money savvy and what made you want to teach other therapists to take control of their money?
That is a great question. When I was entering grad school, I went to the interview and they asked, why do you want to become a therapist? And even in that very first moment, I knew that I couldn't say because I want to have my own practice and make fantastic money and be able to work in my own time in my own way. Like, I don't know what made the taboo there. I didn't know at the time, but I knew I couldn't say it. And all the way through grad school, I knew I want to make good money. I want to be my own boss. And there felt like there's a weight of guilt and a taboo around being able to talk openly about money. When I graduated from that program, I went into a 2-year post-graduate program that was actually for like PhD, PsyD levels, but they took a couple master's level folks. And one of the things they wanted us to do at this nonprofit was talk to our clients every 6 months about money and readdress the fee. And no therapist would do it. And the director would keep saying, remember, we're supposed to be having these conversations. And so for me, I used that moment. I'm like, I'm going to go off and have my own private practice. I'm terrified about talking to my clients about money. What a great place to spend the next 2 years learning how to do this thing, how to lean into those uncomfortable conversations. And as I was doing it myself, I looked around and saw how terrifying it was for every single therapist there, myself included. And I started thinking at that point, like something's going on here. And if I want to have the life that I want to have, I'm going to have to start getting comfortable or learning how to be uncomfortable with making money.
Learning how to be uncomfortable with, I love it. It sounds almost like a little bit of mom guilt, right? You become a mom and you get the guilt on your shoulder, and you become a therapist and you just get the guilt about money.
That is right on. There was one of our students who said, actually, what did she say? Something about how our professors, our supervisors, they are like our professional parents. And so the same messages we got about money in our family of origin, there's a way those are replicated. And we look to our professors, our own therapists, our supervisors around what's okay with money, what's okay to talk about. And unfortunately, the same kind of stories of scarcity and fear and greed and guilt are passed along with us within our psychological development too.
Yeah. And so what made you want to teach other therapists? Like once you got control of that, well, first, how did you get control and stop being uncomfortable with that conversation?
It took time, and I can be honest that I was not comfortable when I started the conversation. And one of the biggest things I learned is to get clear about the reality of my financial needs and desire, and then to start having those conversations even before I felt ready. And one of the things I learned personally and professionally was, holy mackerel, there was so much to be learned by going in and having a conversation that I was scared of having. Our fear is there for a reason. There are so many messages and things to understand and explore on the other side of that fear. And so in fact, it was by virtue of being able to go into those conversations and see like, wow, all this stuff was underneath, that helped me also understand, oh, this is what premium fee therapists do. They are afraid, they're scared, they don't know why, and they're willing to go into those conversations without knowing the outcome. Clients will pay you for that. Because so many people in our lives avoid uncomfortable conversations, avoid conflict,
Yes.
don't speak about the elephant in the room. So if you can become a therapist who not only speaks about their elephant in the room, but is openly going into things that even scare yourself as a therapist, clients want more of that. They're like, that's delicious. Give me that. And so it's the thing that makes us the premium fee therapist is a very act of simply becoming the premium fee therapist.
And so what made you want to teach other people about this?
Yeah, it was not something I chose, I guess I'll say. I was thinking I want to go in and help therapists build their practices. I knew that was a branch of something I wanted to do. I was always excited about business. I thought, man, therapists are terrible at business. But when I got into it, this thing about money kept popping up. So it didn't matter how much we could teach therapists about marketing. If they continued to charge $80 per session, they could have the most beautiful marketing ever, and they're still terrified to actually make money. So I realized there's something here that needs to be looked at. And I actually was resistant. I kind of looked in it. I started writing about it, but I didn't go in to create a program and consult on it for probably 6 months to a year. And I think it was because I kept seeing this be a taboo and nobody was talking about it. And I'm like, well, sex and money. We got to talk about one of these two things. So let's do the money.
Let's do it. And I love how you approach setting fees. And it's very similar to how I approach budgeting for business, where you start with what are your personal needs? So how much money do you need in your personal life? And that is a really eye-opening exercise for most people, right?
Absolutely. It's this thing around, I like both how much do you need, and also I put in the desire piece. I have a fun with fees calculator. And it's also, what do you want for yourself? Which therapists are discouraged from dreaming and thinking about what they want for themselves. So absolutely getting clear about the reality of your current needs and the reality of your desires makes it takes away all the emotional piece. I mean, a lot of emotion comes up after that, but it just allows therapists to see the clear number. And I think in that, there's so much emotion or reality or all kinds of stuff comes up simply around the number. Here's what I need to be charging to get what I want.
And there's so much power in that information. Just knowing makes it a lot less overwhelming, right? Where here's what I need to make, and here's my dream scenario. A lot of times it's not that different. And then you don't have to feel guilty about wanting a nice car or wanting a bigger house or wanting whatever it may be.
I have found, maybe because I encourage therapists to dream big, that sometimes it's not too far off. Like, wow, I only have to raise my fee by $20. I'll be there. But some people are like, oh, wow, Tiffany, you encouraging me to dream big and to get where I want to go is big. And so there's an initial terror. Oh, man. And almost maybe sometimes disappointment. Oh, but always or often it's followed up by empowerment. Like, wow, I now see it. And then the mind starts going to work on who can help me get there? What do I have to do to get there? So there is the initial anxiety, but there's something on the other side of that.
That's true. And then you can start with the planning piece, right?
Yes.
Make the plan.
Yes.
So what are some of the big money mistakes that you see your coaching clients make?
Many. We can even start with what you and I are talking about, which is basing your fee on your emotional experience. So therapists look around, there are a lot of mistakes when setting fees. I'll even just talk about that. You are the master at all of the bookkeeping and what the actual behind the scenes technical mistakes for sure. I think more about setting fees based on quote unquote what the market can bear. But there's no therapist who runs a data analysis on what the market can bear. We kind of just look at what our friends are doing and maybe look on Psychology Today and actually set our fees based on what we already wanted to set them at in the first place. And then we kind of find reasons to reinforce or justify the decision we already made. Another one is setting fees based on what we think a client can afford, as opposed to setting fees based on what we actually need to have to be able to create a successful practice.
And do you mean taking a lot of sliding scale of clients? Because I see that as a big mistake. I see that often as a mistake for private pay clients, where someone will tell me, well, I'm all private pay, but I have all these pro bono clients and all of these are sliding scale. Like, what is happening here?
So many things are happening here. And I'm gonna let you, if you want to go deep into that, we can, but I'll say the surface of that is therapists are afraid to charge. They're also setting fees based on what they imagine they can pay. So if a therapist has never paid more than $75 per session and their fee is quote theoretically at $150 and a client calls, they're going to have a really hard time charging $150. So the first thing therapists say is, my fee is $150, but what can you afford? That's something therapists do all the time. And they just start right off the bat discounting and dismissing the value of their own services before the client even has a chance to say anything about what they are expecting.
Before the client has even had a chance to say something. I know you need to say your fee and then shut your mouth.
Shut your mouth.
Shut it.
Absolutely.
Shut it. So what do you recommend for sliding scale, if any?
That comes back to another mistake therapists make. And we get this from our supervisors. Our four mothers in the field tell us to do this, which is build your practice with sliding scale first. And then as you get more comfortable, you can start raising your fee. I think that's the biggest mistake, especially if you do long-term work, because then your practice is filled with people who can't actually support your business. And you don't want to kick them out at that point. That feels unethical. That feels bad. So then you're thinking, okay, I guess I'll raise my fee by $5 every millennia. And hopefully one day I'll have a six-figure practice. So yeah, it's a huge mistake. And we're told to do it, and it leaves us in a lurch.
And I find that oftentimes those sliding scale clients are in the very best of spots. So they have the most desirable times because they were the first one in, right? So you discounted, you put them in the best spot and they stay there. And so you've got all these midday spots open, no one to put in them, and sliding scale clients in your most desirable times.
So one of the things I love about talking with you, and we're going to have many more conversations, surprise, you have so much data on this. So what do you do, or how do you approach it when you have a therapist who comes and suddenly all their evening and morning spots are filled with sliding scale clients, and now they're in this predicament? How do you work with them around that?
Yeah, so it's not an overnight fix, certainly. So most of the time when we see something like that, it's a solo practice owner and they are private pay only. So what we'll usually do is we will take the blame, right? So we'll be the bad guy and we will close down some of the sliding scale spots and the pro bonos as well, right? So we'll say, okay, what can we afford? There's a maximum of 2, 3, 4, usually in that range, sliding scale spots per week from now on. You can blame us because I can take it. We've got it. But then so it's not as difficult to have that conversation with the client sometimes. And then you have to work on bringing in those full fee clients, because if you're just full at half of your fee, you might as well be taking insurance. And if you can't have that conversation, you want to take insurance, then do that. But if you're going to be a private pay practice and that conversion rate is so much lower, you might as well get your full fee or just go to insurance.
This is brilliant. So one of the things, this is why I created my program that we're in and why we went into this. So many therapists will say, all right, even if they have a bad guy like you, who's going to give them an excuse, but they haven't actually tackled why they need the thing inside them makes them need an excuse, the thing inside them makes them have to go to a third party. And often therapists do this with insurance. Okay, they're dealing with the money. I don't have to. Shoo, that's a problem, because then when a client who's eager and ready to pay $200 cash pay per session every week for the next 5 years comes in, that therapist never dealt with all their money shame, their money anxiety, their money avoidance, and their self-worth, their lack of self-worth. So they actually unconsciously are pushing away the full fee clients who do come. So it doesn't matter how much marketing they do. It doesn't matter if they feel like, all right, I can raise my fees because I've kicked out some sliding scale. They'll get rid of those full fee people without even being aware of what they're doing to mess that up.
And if you quote a price, or if someone quotes you a price, like if you're having some work done on your house, and the second they say the price, they discount it, it doesn't feel that premium in the first place, right?
Absolutely.
But I'm also, if you just get discounted it, I'm not going to say, oh no, don't worry about it, let me pay that higher price. That's just not going to happen.
That's right. That's right. I even have therapists who have gotten cash pay premium folks who come in and say, I want to start with you, but then they leave after 2 or 3 sessions. And again, I think there's so much our therapists are unconsciously conveying about their own insecurity and doubt about why that person is paying them so much money, that person picks up on the anxiety, and they're going to go find someone who charges $200 and feels good about charging $200, and they have absolute confidence in that fee.
It's really interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way, where the therapist is probably thinking they left because it was too much money, and the client actually left because they could sense the discomfort. That's really, really interesting.
Absolutely.
All right. So why do you think therapists feel so guilty about making money?
there's a ton around this. And I think therapists have the feeling that it's personal and they feel ashamed about their inability to overcome this issue, when in fact, there's a ton of data to support why therapists feel so ashamed and insecure about charging more. And I work with women primarily. I have some dudes, some cis white dudes who sneak in there sometimes, and we love working with them, but primarily women and people of color and people who grew up with blue collar backgrounds. So if we take these populations and look at the history and the context around what it means to be a woman, especially a woman of color, and say, I'm going to charge X, a premium fee, and I'm going to be unapologetic about it. We don't have a social support or historical support for that at all. So there's the larger context around what it means for women to earn money proudly and without apology, say, here's what I'm charging. Oh, there's not a precedent for that. And then also, if we look within the therapy profession specifically, there was a really interesting paper written by psychologist Ella Lasky in the 80s. And even then she looked at the difference between therapists and people from other professions, people who become therapists versus people who don't. And she found that therapists are more likely to have been within their family, the helper, the one who sacrifices their well-being to make sure everybody's okay, the one who puts out fires, mediates conflict between the parents. So therapists, and especially women, our very identities are often tied up in being a helper. That's what we do. And to ask for money for being a helper feels like antithetical to our very identity. So it's social, it's political, and it comes all the way down to our family of origins issue. So it's on every level we get hit by, holy mackerel, what it means to confidently charge for our services.
That's really interesting. And I'll bet, especially with the population that you work with, maybe you're going to your sister, your best friend, your mom, your dad, and saying, I'm going to have a full fee practice and I'm going to charge $200 an hour. And they're saying, what? Right? Is that happening in the background too?
Yeah. And for folks who cannot see us, Julie kind of smiled. What? The family members say in response. In fact, it's often terror and almost like accusation. There are so many husbands. When women want to join my program, the husbands say, are you sure? Are you sure it's okay to leave insurance? Are you sure that you can afford that investment? And often women say, oh, before I join, let me check in with my husband. I'm like, this is your business. I have to hold myself in. So I'm have been recently following this woman who's phenomenal. Her name is Rachel Rogers. Have you heard of her?
I have not. I'm going to look her up.
Look her up. She has a program called We Should All Be Millionaires, or a book, something like this coming out. And she talks a lot about how when you look at the historical context, it wasn't even until the 60s or 70s that women could have a bank account on their own, open that they could have a line of credit. So really, if we look over the past, it's been only the past 40 years that women have even been allowed to be in charge of their own money. So that there are so many echoes of that in our culture now, where women feel like I got to get permission from my husband or my parents or my friends before I make an investment that's going to help me in my business. That shows up everywhere.
That's so true. And I'm sure that comment by the husband is very well intentioned, but it still, as a woman, makes you kind of take a step back and say, am I right to do this, when you know, in fact, what's right for your business? So that brings me to my next question, because most of the private practice clients that my firm works with, they go into business to work less hours, make more money, and have more control over their schedule, right? A lot of times it's related to those things, sometimes because of family, sometimes because they've been at an agency and have worked just huge hours and not very much money. But being a business owner, that doesn't always happen as planned. So sometimes practice owners will look up and they're working as much, if not more, as before, and hardly making any profit in the business. They might be making some money, but there's not a lot of profit left. So what recommendations do you have for someone who's working way too much and earning way too little?
That's fantastic. Number one, I'll tell them to give you a call, because clearly you've seen this many times and you know how to navigate this with folks. It comes back to getting real about both what your current financial needs are, and then I say getting clear about what you want. So coming back to this idea of therapists dreaming big, and I'm not all woo-woo, but I do believe you need to know what you want and where you want to be. And therapists have been so discouraged from thinking about their well-being at all. We've been encouraged to think about the well-being of everyone else and ourselves as not even second, but like third, fourth, or fifth. So we really work with therapists to get clear about if you have the schedule you want, let's think about your morning. What do you want your morning to look like? And outside of, well, if I see my client, this one needs to see me at 7 a.m. and that one let's slow down and back up. Oh, I want to get up. When I get up, I want to have a coffee. I want to go on a jog and write in my journal. When they can start tasting actually what it means to have the morning they want, it allows them to start thinking, all right, in order to make that happen, my fees need to be this. My schedule would look like this. Let's reverse engineer that. So I would say the number one thing is getting absolutely clear about what you want and giving yourself permission to dream big and take care of you.
Giving yourself permission to dream big. I love that. So how do you do that? Do you write it down? Do you have a vision board? How does that look like in your life?
For me personally?
Yeah.
I do this in all kinds of ways all the time. It's interesting. Let me not be too complicated about this. I think when we have to do intentional work with clients to be clear about what they want their life to look like, it's often because they've had a hard time getting in touch at all with their own desires. For me, I have a visceral sense, a feeling of, here's what freedom looks like for me. Here's what I want my life to be. And it's just a given. It's gonna happen. I don't even need to dream board it because it's inevitable. So I'm just taking steps now to reach that inevitable thing. That's number one. Number two, and I do this work because I've struggled through these things. Let's be clear. I'm not like, I'm going to come down from my mountain to help therapists. I have never, I'll say rarely, taken a job for the money. I never believed anyone was going to do anything for me. So I knew if I was going to have anything, it's got to be by my own hand. And I think that's why I'm 40 now and only just now getting in charge of my professional life, really like, oh, I can see it. I'm going to have a 7-figure business within the next 2 years, but really the next 1 year. Like I can see it clearly, but there's been a lot of compromises I've refused to make. So I'm never going to work 70 hours for 15 cents an hour for somebody else who's going to not give me a promotion. So there's something in terms of how I do it. I can say this piece has been internally, I'm aware of where I want to go and what I want my life to look like. And I do not compromise on that feeling state at any point.
I love it. So you're keeping the end goal in mind always, right?
Yes.
I think that's so powerful.
Yeah, I feel it.
It's so easy as a business owner. And I find that happens with a lot of our clients. You get so stuck in the minutia of running a business that you forget about the big goal. You forget about wanting to be home for dinner every night or wanting to take 4 vacations a year. Whatever that looks like, business owners forget the big picture way too often.
That's right. And I'll say this is something that I don't have perfectly in my mind yet by any means. But another thing that I highly recommend for folks is getting help, like help from someone like you who's going to say, what do you want? What about your 4 vacations a year? Where are we going to build that in? Or help from the Lean and Make Bank Academy, where there's all kinds of therapists who are working on this. This is something that I too could forget, but I pay a lot of people a lot of money to help me move towards what I want. I'm big on investing in other people to help me reach my goals.
Oh, that's a great point. So we do a lot of work around where do you want to be with your business and personally, right? So does it mean you're buying a new house, buying a building for the business? Do you want to retire in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? What does that look like? And how do we set you up today to get there when you're ready? So having someone on your team that remembers that, and that can sometimes, when you get lost in the forest, can remind you of those things, can be really helpful, right?
Yes.
So how about for insurance practices? Do you have any recommendations on how clinicians can value themselves, even if they don't have any say on the fee that they get?
I'm the worst person to ask that question because everyone who comes into my program, we try to get them off insurance. I personally don't know how a therapist can run their practice on the little bit that insurance pays them and really have a life of freedom and flexibility because the reimbursement rates are so low. So we actually work really hard to help our therapists feel what it feels like to make the move to get off insurance and then get there. And then if they want to get back on a panel, they are welcome to, but they do not. Because once you taste what it feels like to not be beholden to someone else, why do you want to go back to be beholden to someone else? So I'm terrible at that.
All right. So what does that process look like then? So someone comes into your program, they're all insurance. How do they transition out?
We start with the foundation, and I won't go into all of that, but really the foundations of getting a community, getting connected to folks who believe it's possible for you and who you see like, okay, this is possible. So first surrounding yourself with people who are rooting for you and give you a vision of what could be. And then in terms of so we do the piece around your community, getting you embedded in that. Number 2, we start doing the mindset work. So as much as there's the tactical strategy, which I'll go into in a moment, there's so much foundational stuff that has to occur before a therapist is ready to do the thing that's actually quite easy, which is calling your insurance, finding out what it takes to get off and how long it takes to get off the panel, and then having a conversation with all your existing clients about, hey, in 90 days, I'm going to be getting off insurance. Here's what my fees are going to be. Let's dive in. And what therapists don't anticipate is that, especially if you could do good clinical work, many of those people will pay. And you need so much fewer folks who are now paying $150 or $200 versus your $70. You could actually see so many fewer clients and be earning the same amount or more money. The process is simple, but the foundational stuff first to let the therapist make those moves is the harder work and the exciting work.
So the mindset part is the hard work, and then actually getting off the panel, that's the easy part, and talking to your clients.
Easy as pie. Well, the talking to the clients, that's hard too. That's part of the mindset. But the logistics of getting off insurance panels is straightforward. And you're actually not going to lose 100% of your clients. They're not all going to leave you. And if they do, there's some information there about your clinical work that needs to be addressed, and we'll address it.
Okay, so it's a good time for introspection then.
Let me ask you, this is great. So you have therapists who come to you on insurance. Do you find when they actually look at their numbers that many are able to make it work on insurance, or do they start over time realize like, oh, I'm going to work off of panels? I
would say we have probably a 60-40 mix of insurance versus private pay. That would be my guess. I've actually never looked at those specific numbers, but now I might have to do that. I might have to go look at that. So most of the time when we have insurance practices, they tend to be larger. So they tend to be groups. Yes. Where the owner isn't necessarily having to see, 40 clients a week. The owner is doing a lot of the vision work, a lot of the recruiting, a lot of the team management, a lot of the leadership work. And so in that sense, they're not clinically exhausted. So there might be always a revolving door. There comes a size in a practice where you're basically always recruiting because someone's going to leave, someone's going to go on maternity leave, like something is going to happen. And so there's a lot more turnover in an insurance practice because typically the pay that you can offer is just going to be lower.
That's very astute. And it makes me think about, I talk to my therapist about getting out of groups, starting your own practice where you can be in charge of your earning power. But I also have group practice owners who join so they can get right about their money and think about what they want to be doing for their employees. And so I'm conflicted myself around group practice owners who I actually understand. They take on a lot of risk. They've worked for years without making any money. So it makes sense that they're going to do what they need to do to get paid now. And it puts the employees in a position of maybe not getting paid themselves. So it comes back to therapists again, overworking and under earning. So it's a cycle that we're constantly in. And it makes me wonder, what would it look like for group practice owners to be able to also create cash pay premium fee practices where all of the employees there also make a good living, and we can empower each other as women, as people of color, to all earn together, as opposed to being trapped by the third-party systems that are certainly benefiting from this arrangement, whereas most therapists are not benefiting from this arrangement of being on insurance panels.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because we have quite a few large group practices that are private pay only. And there are some differences there, right? Where they spend a lot more money on marketing. Typically, their clinicians make a lot more money as well, in dollars, not necessarily in percentage, but in dollars. But during an economic downturn, like we saw, at the end of March and early April, those were some tough months for private pay only practices, especially the large ones. Most have recovered and are now at mostly normal, where they were before. But yeah, it's interesting to see how that changes. And I've got to tell you, there's just about as much turnover in private pay practices as in insurance practices.
How interesting.
Yeah. I love that you encourage people to go out on their own, because I think I love owning a business. I think it's a really amazing adventure. But there are people who are not interested at all in being their own boss, right? They want to go, they want to do their work, and they want to leave. And for those people, I think a group practice can be a really great place, especially if there's certain years of your life sometimes, like when you're a new mom, or depending on what is going on, or like maybe there's a older parent to care for, whatever it may be, where that just works better for you, right?
I love it. And it makes me think of, we both know Uriah Guilford, who's a group practice owner, and he does so well by his employees. He's someone who I'm like, yeah, he really knows how to run a group practice. So he's an example of, oh yeah. And, I get caught in my silos. He's a good example of, oh yeah, I can see why people would want to work in a group practice, why therapists would. And the not having all the weight or responsibility of owning a business is a huge benefit for a lot of folks, because it is not easy to own your own business.
It is not easy. I mean, in those first few years, you work usually more than you thought you would. Yeah. So
Absolutely. I'm still working more than yeah.
Are you're kind of where you want to be?
I don't work very many hours. I have a little kid at home, a 16-month-old, and I spend a lot of time with him. And often I think, how does one, I actually find that the more I am able to prioritize not work, I'm finding, the business is actually starting to generate more money when I get myself out of the way, which is a surprise. And it's not something that working class people anticipate before it starts happening.
That's really interesting. So by working less, you're making more.
Yeah, it's weird.
That's really neat. All right. I would love to hear about your philosophy on spending money to make money.
Yeah. And before we got on the show, I was talking to Julie, like, I might need to hire you to help me think about this, because although I have had my private practice for some time and my online business, Hey Tiffany, for some time, this is the first year I'm really investing heavily in building the online portion of my business. And I could be making a million mistakes. I don't know. So I'm investing a lot in coaching. I'm investing in a lot of people to help me with ads. I'm investing in a team who I'm really committed to. And so I'm not bringing home a lot of money into my own pocket yet. So I don't know in the beginning stages of like, this is a thing about taking risks. I'm taking a risk with this, and I may be making a big mistake, but I'm okay with making mistakes because I know I'm going to learn. So I'm very big on investing in learning from people who have done it before me to teach me how to get there. I'm big in investing on amazing team members who are excited and passionate about making change and working together with them. I'm big on investing, which I need to do now, someone to help me with my money. I have a bookkeeper, I have a payroll company, but having someone think with me about the numbers, because I'm not a numbers person. I'm learning this myself. So why not pay someone who's been doing this for X many years, who's worked with, how many people have you worked with, you said, companies?
Over 150 now.
Oh my gosh. Someone who's worked with over 150 companies and seen the mistakes they make. Why not invest? That's my philosophy.
Oh, that's a good philosophy. So you're willing to forego current cash for the future reward, for the future of the business.
Absolutely. My time is important. So I'm buying my time right now. And I have a lot of time that I get to spend with my family and my kiddos. My kiddo, maybe kiddo for now, kiddo, and and bring home less money in the present.
That makes a lot of sense. So depending on your priority, that totally makes sense, whether it's you're spending more time seeing clients or spending more time with the kiddo, to hire some people to do the things that you don't need to be doing. I love when folks work in their area of genius. So whatever that is to you, get everything else off your plate, right?
Absolutely.
All right, Tiffany, tell our listeners where they can find out more about you and your coaching program.
Absolutely. I always suggest people start with my fee calculator. If you're a therapist in private practice, go to heytiffany.com/fee calculator. We have our Fun with Fee calculator, and you can actually learn what your fees need to be so you can start working towards getting the money you need to get.
I love that calculator. I discovered it a couple of weeks ago, and I really, really, really love it. So we'll link to it in the show notes. It's a great place to start. Tiffany, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was so nice to chat with you. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, and I'm very excited to hear other episodes you do.
All right, listeners, what's your action item for today? Do you need to write down some goals? Do you need some time to think big? Before we officially started recording, Tiffany was asking me about why I started the podcast. So I want to leave you today by sharing that little clip with you.
You were talking about the reason you started working with therapists, got into this whole thing.
Yeah. So we've been working with therapists for years, and yet there's always some people that just we can't necessarily help, right? They're not big enough, or there really just isn't enough money. They're not ready, whatever the reason is. And also, like, I have a finite, there's a finite number of clients we can help, and I want to help all the people. And so that's what the podcast is for. There's so many lessons that we've learned from just aggregating the data and looking like these are really profitable practices over here. What are they doing? And what are the struggle bunnies doing? And like, how can we help all? Because sharing the knowledge takes nothing away from either one of those. So we can share the lessons learned, and we can share the successes. And so when a client comes to us and says, I want to add benefits, for example, we can say like, well, this is some ways that we've seen it structured in a profitable way. You can add this first and then add this in a year, and keep that into account when we're doing the compensation structure, because like this is kind of the cap where we want to be, and like all the pieces kind of work together. So that's why I started the podcast, to just talk to fun people and be able to share the wealth of knowledge in a more broad way.
Beautiful. For folks listening, I don't know if Julie's going to have this part of the podcast, but this is what we're talking about. We're very aligned with our values around getting the message out that therapists can make money and do well. And we don't have to be scared about our money, because there are people who are very knowledgeable and kind and thoughtful like Julie, who can help us navigate it and give us clear feedback and strategies to make it happen. So that's what you came in on that conversation, everyone.
Yeah. And as I was getting ready for talking with you, Tiffany, I was thinking back to what my mom used to say when I was little. It's just as easy to love a rich man as a poor man. And I would say the same thing applies to private practice. Like, it's just as easy to have a profitable practice as a not profitable one. And I would actually say it's probably a lot easier to have a profitable practice, because if you've got money in your life, everything else flows a little bit better, right?
Your mom sounds amazing and hilarious.
That was the lesson from my mom. I'm not sure if that's PC, but that is something that she used to say. If you need some accounting help, head over to therapyforyourmoney.com and click on the Green Oak Accounting button. There you can find out lots of information about my accounting firm and all of our specialized services for private practice owners.
The information contained in this podcast represents the host and guest's general opinions and should not be construed as personalized accounting and tax advice. Listeners should consider all facts and circumstances before applying this information and seek appropriate advice from an accountant, financial planner, lawyer, or other professional. Any info provided does not constitute accounting, tax, or legal advice.